You know what? I'll admit it. I was wrong about SteamOS. So recently we had the announcement of the Steam Machine pricing, and it has been an interesting day or so with people reacting to it. That is $1,049 for the lowest tier model with 512 gigabytes and no Steam controller. If you want a controller, that is $1,128. Then for the 2TB model, that is $1,349. And with the controller is $1,428. And in Australia, that means the base model is at $1,609, with the top tier model with the controller at $2,228, which is certainly an ask. It is certainly a price. However, whilst the price might seem unreasonable, it is unreasonable in a market that is unreasonable. The price of the Steam Machine isn't actually that crazy compared to everything else. And that's the craziest thing. This is a custom board. This is a small form factor system. You have the integrated puck to connect. I think it's 4 different Steam controllers. You have a bunch of these nice little features that are in this thing, and it's only just a little bit more expensive than what you can DIY yourself. There are people that are talking about DIY builds, Gamers Nexus being one of them, and depending on what you want to prioritize, if you want to go like absolute bare minimum system, you can get something around $979 American. This does mean you are going with one of the worst possible power supplies on the entire market that probably isn't going to light your house on fire. I can't say for sure that it isn't, though, so I would spend just a little bit more on the power supply. If you're willing to go a bit more over the Steam Machine price, you can get a slightly better CPU and massively outperform the Steam Machine. But it's not the Steam Machine itself that I was wrong about. I think everybody kind of expected it was gonna be expensive. Anyone who thought you were gonna see $700, maybe that's what they were originally trying to target. There has been discussions and rumors there, and if you go from some of the interviews that various people have done where they're not allowed to talk about the price, but the Valve people will definitely hint at, oh, look at the original price of the Steam Deck. You can kind of work out what we were trying to go for here. I think everyone kind of assumed it was going to be expensive. What I was wrong about was SteamOS itself. I have said many, many times, don't bother waiting for general purpose SteamOS. It's not coming. It's not worth your time. Just go and install Linux. And the main reason I've said this is for the past over 4 years now, ever since the launch of the Steam Deck, it has been the go-to excuse by so many people for not trying Linux. Oh, I can't use Linux. I'm waiting for SteamOS. All will be good in the world when SteamOS is ready. SteamOS is going to be the thing that finally makes Linux ready, going so far as janking the restore image onto entirely unsupported machines, and it mostly kind of works. I have been saying this entire time, if you basically want SteamOS, go and install Bazite. It's going to be most of the way there. It's going to be what you want. Yes, it is not branded as SteamOS. Yes, it is not made by Valve. But this is going to be the thing that gives you something today that actually exists. However, whilst we don't have an actual date for things being available, there is a recent interview by The Verge with Pierre-Loup Griffiths. Valve will finally let you build your own Steam machine with SteamOS for desktop. They are working very closely on SteamOS support for NVIDIA hardware. Valve says that starting with SteamOS 3.8 release, you can put together your own Steam machine using whatever PC parts you want. SteamOS 3.8.10 launched last week with a slew of updates, including improved compatibility with recent Intel and AMD platforms. Alongside that improved compatibility, Valve is giving gamers the green light to install SteamOS on their own desktops. Valve has been rolling out improvements to SteamOS so it's more compatible with desktop hardware, including eventual support for NVIDIA graphics. We are collaborating with NVIDIA very closely. While he mentioned that NVIDIA support might not come this year, Griffiths emphasized that it's certainly something we're working on in the background. I am very curious to see exactly what that implies, because this has been a major sticking point, not just for gaming, but just general Linux usage for so long, where setting up your NVIDIA drivers has been kind of a nightmare, and then distros like Fedora, which are in America and have to deal with all this code trademark nonsense, haven't even been able to ship the proprietary drivers, and you've had to go through all of these hoops and get it in from this extra repo, which is a whole mess, and it's really dumb. So if Valve can actually come along and entirely iron out that problem, not have these two separate versions like you have with Bazzite, you just install SteamOS, it installs everything in the background that you need, and it just works with NVIDIA, that, I think, is actually going to be something which sells a lot of people who are just a little bit afraid of NVIDIA stuff ever going slightly wrong. Because you can absolutely do it now, but this is targeting people who are not people who necessarily want to tinker with their system. It's technically been possible to run SteamOS on your own hardware for a while now, but compatibility has been mostly limited to AMD systems. So far, installing it has also required using a Steam Deck recovery image, a process that, speaking from experience, is much less straightforward than the installation process for most other Linux distributions. Trying to run SteamOS on Intel or NVIDIA hardware has not been easy so far. According to Griffiths, Valve is working to change that. For the immediate future, Griffiths says SteamOS in its current state should offer a good experience on console-like PC setups if you have something that is similar to the use case of a Steam machine, where you have a PC that's going to be plugged into a TV and has a single hard drive. This is actually a key problem here. A single hard drive that you're not going to try and dual boot. Another thing which a lot of people want to do with their system, where they want to have the Linux version, but there's certain games they play, like Valorant, for example, which they just have to do on Windows. You can put SteamOS on there, and you have an experience that is very similar to a Steam Deck docked or a Steam machine, with some caveats, of course, like the missing HDMI CEC support, which is something which I frankly don't really care about, but I know some people, that's kind of like a core thing they really want. While Griffiths mentioned a SteamOS installer, he also said it's not designed for dual booting alongside another OS just yet. There's not yet an install wizard. We can easily, move another OS out of the way and partition your hard drive. Doing this and having support for multiple drives, I think, are a very key thing that needs to be there before any sort of general recommendation of, wider installation. If you're basically just building, a Steam machine of your own parts, you can do that, but anything more than that, not just yet. As was mentioned earlier, if you want to do this now, you've still got to go and jank the recovery image onto this unsupported hardware. At this stage, it's not really something where they are yet supporting it, but it is clear from this latest interview that this is something they are actually working towards. Since the price was announced for the Steam machine, there has been a lot of, I would say, public sentiment shift over what this device is. It was already starting to shift when people realized this was not going to be a cheap device. People realized with the RAM prices, this was going to be a problem. But a lot of people were hoping that this would be the savior of PCs. This would be the thing where we finally get cheap computing again, even though they never said they were going to take a loss on these machines. And if they did take a loss, to get it back to the prices that people expect, we would be seeing them take a loss of like $250 plus for the machines, which, Yes, you might do for a actual console where it is locked into an ecosystem, but you don't have to play any Steam games on the Steam machine. You can emulate stuff. You can just play your existing library and never purchase another game again. You can just be someone who plays nothing but Final Fantasy XIV, and that is your entire life. There is no guarantee that you're actually going to feed money back into that ecosystem. So taking that loss, I understand why they didn't do it. But at the same time, I also understand why people are disappointed by the price. And a lot of people are saying things like, it's DOA, it's dead on arrival, or this should have been delayed even longer, or other things like that, to just try and justify, try to explain why things are this bad. One thing you might think is, couldn't Valve just get better RAM pricing, right? Like, they're a system integrator at this point. Shouldn't they be able to get, like, bulk pricing, which is much, much cheaper? Well, this was discussed in a recent interview on Gamers Nexus. Let us have a quick listen.
Here's the important part. Were you able to lock in kind of contracts for memory with the suppliers directly, or did you have to jump through a bunch of hoops, or...
Look, there's no...
You don't have to hear the answer. Just look at that smile. It was like, no.
There's no contracts. There's nothing. Yeah. Like, those guys, they are, you know, they give us a price every month or something. Okay. And they say, you can buy that many, and it's yes or no. And if we say no, then they never talk to us again, right?
So the RAM situation is...
Yeah. And this isn't just the case with Valve. This is the case with a lot of other companies as well. And the reason why they're like this, they don't need to care, because the AI companies are going to dump $500 billion into RAM. So why do they care if some system integrator is buying the RAM or not? They're going to sell the RAM one way or another. So, hey, who cares? You suck. Come back when you have $12 trillion to dump into our market. Ultimately, I'm sure that Valve does want the Steam machine to sell well, but I also don't think they usually put all of their eggs in one basket. If they don't sit on their asses and they actually get SteamOS with NVIDIA support out and an installer and having it work with extra drives and all this stuff, which you can do on a regular distro, and this not take another 4 years to happen, I think things are in the process of changing, because right now, people are primed around the idea of building their own Steam machine, building their own Linux gaming box. And in that recent Steam update, there are some things which, alongside setting Wayland as the default now, which is very, very nice to see, also some things which make it a bit easier to test things out. Initial support for running as a virtual machine guest VirtIO drivers. So running this in a virtual machine just became quite a bit more performant. This is another step along the way of testing. And if we look back at the OG Steam machine, it was a dumb device at a dumb time. Yes, it was what got Linux gaming properly started. Yes, there was some games on Linux before then, but Steam for Linux came along because of the original Steam machines. But Proton didn't exist at that time. They wanted to go down the route of native games, bring developers natively to the platform. That just didn't happen. And at this point is probably not going to happen either. But now that Proton is mature, now the Steam Deck has been running SteamOS for a long time, and official support for other handhelds exists, and there's a lot of discussion of these distros outside of just SteamOS, and a lot of people are now seeing, hey, you actually can game on this Linux system. This isn't just this thing for nerds now who want a system that barely functions. Yes, obviously anti-cheat is a problem, but if you don't deal with that stuff, most other things at this point you can just play without any concerns whatsoever. There has been a lot of marketing around Linux in general as a platform for gaming, and SteamOS as a distro that makes this a really convenient thing to do, even if I don't necessarily think that you need SteamOS for it. Valve has not been a fan of Microsoft basically ever since they launched the Microsoft Store, pretty much. Probably even before that point, but that was the first point where they were very publicly vocal about it. Ultimately, the goal here seems to be getting more people out of that ecosystem and getting people into an ecosystem where Valve is basically the only store option. Because yes, you can use Epic Games on Linux, but firstly, a lot of people don't really like Epic Games, and secondly, they don't have a native client. If you want to do that, you got to do like a third-party thing, and yes, it works quite well, but Valve is sort of it is the thing that has its tendrils in all Linux gaming. Valve, whether you're playing on Steam or you're playing, some random other thing on another launcher, you're probably still making use of Valve technology. If they're actually serious about supporting general SteamOS usage, letting people build their own Steam machines, it would be stupid to not get this out as quickly as possible in a way which they can capitalize on this sort of dislike of the Steam machine pricing. I don't think that they want the Steam machine to fail, but I think they were aware that this was gonna be a bit of a rough ask, and a lot of people were gonna put out these videos on how to build a cheaper Steam machine, DIY, and at the end of the day, Valve still wins there, right? At the end of the day, you're still likely buying games on Steam, you're likely moving away from Windows as a platform, you're still reliant on Valve. And I know people like to look at Valve as the good guys, but you gotta remember, Valve is a company. They're not just doing things to make the world better, to just magically improve the Linux gaming space. It's just a lot of the interests of Valve also tend to align with a lot of the interests of the consumers as well in most things. We can talk about skin gambling and other things like that, but that's a whole nother question. I am not a VR guy myself, so I don't really care about the headset, but I'm very curious to see what the next play from Valve is going to be. What happens next? Because after the original Steam machine failed, then we got Proton. After the Steam Deck came out, this created this sort of, I guess, realization that people can actually play games on Linux. Now the Steam machine is coming out, now we know the price, and people are talking about DIYing your own Steam machine. So where do we go from here? What is next? I don't know, but I'll definitely be keeping an eye out to see what is happening. On a semi-related note, it is pretty clear why we couldn't just go and buy a Steam controller now. Because there is that bundled version with the Steam machine, and I'm assuming for whatever reason they just didn't have the stock for it and wanted to make sure you could actually go and buy this version. Now, it's already sold out basically everywhere, so good luck with that one. But at least that initial sale, they wanted to make sure there were actually controllers available. At the end of the day, I'm still going to be over here running Arch Linux and basically taking advantage of everything else Valve is doing, because even though I'm not using SteamOS, I'm not necessarily playing every game on Steam, most of them I do, I am still within the Valve ecosystem, and right now, Valve's interests align with mine. They're trying to improve Linux gaming, sounds like they're trying to work with NVIDIA to do something. They pay money to KDE to improve the desktop. Overall, I'm happy with what Valve is doing. Even if the Steam machine itself doesn't sell that well, I'm still happy with what they have done and what they're continuing to do to Linux as a platform. But let me know your thoughts down below. If you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to Brodie, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and don't stop the steam.